Very own Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, who are record breakers. Walk in the light like Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson and President Barack Obama, who are path makers. Ladies and gentlemen, we must all walk in the light. Walk in the light like Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, who is our peacemaker. He's our dream maker. He's our rule breaker. He's our risk taker. He's our freedom maker. He's our groundbreaker. He's our record breaker. He's our path maker. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our leader. He's the pastor of Fellowship Chapel. He works on the pension board, founder of Freedom Institute, Fannie Lou Hamer, National NAACP board member. He's the president of the biggest branch of the NAACP, the Detroit branch NAACP. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony. Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, our leader.
Thank you, Hester. Thank you, Hester. Let me say good afternoon and good evening to everyone. Certainly want to welcome all of you here to our 54th annual Fight for Freedom Fund dinner. We want to thank all of those sponsors who have helped us in our dinner and celebration tonight. Please direct your attention to the screen as we honor the W.E.B. Du Bois sponsors and those participating in the campaign for this year.
In 1909, several black and white leaders from different organizations such as the Committee of 40 and the Niagara Movement came together to form what is now the oldest civil rights organization in the country.
The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, headed by W.E.B. Du Bois.
W.E.B. Du Bois Corporate Campaign.
Platinum.
Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan.
The Ambassador Bridge Company.
Gold.
Charter One Bank.
DTE Energy.
Ford Motor Company.
JP Morgan Chase.
Silver.
Comcast.
Delta Airlines.
St. John Health System.
Motor City Casino.
The Nielsen Company.
Bronze.
Please refer to page 318 in your souvenir journal for a complete listing of corporate campaign sponsors.
Let us thank all of our W.E.B. Du Bois sponsors. Let's give them a hand. Thank you so much for your assistance. How many of you drove a car or rode with somebody to get here tonight? Raise your hand. That means that we are still on wheels. We are still the Motor City capital of the world. And tonight, we just wanted to take a moment to pause and to say thank you to the U.S. auto industry. How many of you, either yourself or a relative or a friend, work at General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler? Raise your hand, or you know somebody. When I got out of Central High School, you could go to one of the O's, the auto industry or the post office. And you had a good job, you had excellent benefits, and you had a good life. Today, more than at any other time, we want to salute the U.S. auto industry, because the auto industry has over time saluted our nation and its people by the transition it has made during the time of national emergency. We salute the U.S. auto industry and the workers, because it is on the backs of this industry that many in the African American community found the formulation of the new black middle class. It was through Ford Motor Company General Motors, and Chrysler, that lives changed, gains were made, and barriers, though often resistant, were broken down. Lest we forget, when the world was at war and our nation needed factories and armaments and men and women dedicated not only to build cars, but who could ship and build tanks, armament and planes, ammunition to preserve and to maintain our position in the world. It was the auto industry that stepped up so that we did not have to step back. It was in 1939 that the International Executive Board of the CIO's United Auto Workers demanded an end to discrimination in all plants with which they had agreements. This is the centennial year of the NAACP. At the 50th annual convention of the NAACP in New York, it was attended by 118 union leaders, including A. Philip Randolph, Cleveland Robinson, and Walter Reuther, president of the United Auto Workers, all of them speaking in labor sessions on issues confronting workers of every color and condition. It is out of this crucible of anxiety, struggle, and negotiation that emerges the current industry that has moved many to health care, education, decent housing, retirement benefits, which now seem to be moving in a direction determined that years ago that our forerunners have determined as beneficial for us. So tonight, we want to say thank you to the industry. We want to lift up the auto workers and say to all to keep on holding on. Detroit is still the motor city capital of the world. It is still the place where standards have been set and new innovations have been met. We thank the president for remaining committed to the industry, but we also want the nation to remember what industry it was that helped to keep us secure as a nation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the president and the chairman of the General Motors Corporation, Mr. Fritz Henderson, representing the auto industry. Fritz Henderson, CEO of the General Motors Corporation.
Thank you, reminder that the work we're doing to reinvent the company and our industry is worth it. Congratulations on 100 years for the NAACP, and thanks for having me here this evening. Thank you.
We wanted to give Chairman Fritz Henderson and General Motors something significant of this occasion. This is a crystal block with two hands clasped together. It simply means hold on, hold on. The Detroit branch NAACP presents to Fritz Henderson and the General Motors Corporation our Keep Holding On Award. Reverend Wendell Anthony and Hester Wheeler, May 3rd, 2009. To Fritz and to Rod Gillum, who's been a bulwark of support for the NAACP. Thank you very much. It's one thing to have an auto industry, but you gotta have workers. You gotta have folk to build the cars, who get up and work 2 or 3 shifts, morning, noon, and night, who have sacrificed so much during this time period for the auto industry to be trim and slim. Let's give a hand for the workers who work every day within our plants all around America and all around the world. Let's hear it for the workers. Because without workers building the cars, walking the floors, pushing the buttons, making the screws turn, getting up in the morning, working late at night, coming in on overtime, no time, your time, my time, without the workers, we would not have the auto industry. So we thank God for the workers who have made the industry what it is today. And so we thank you, all of those who work every day. And we thank Ford Motor Company, represented by Pam Alexander, and also we want to thank Levin Weiss from Chrysler Corporation. Those are very, very important people to our community and to this process. But I'd like for you to turn your attention to our screen, because we have a tribute from the UAW and the workers, and then we're going to call on Mr. Ron Gettelfinger, President of the United Auto Workers. Direct your attention to the screen.
Thank you. On behalf of our International Executive Board and the men and women of the UAW, we're proud to join President Wendell Anthony and the leadership of the Detroit branch of the NAACP as part of your Freedom Fund dinner. And we're proud of our common heritage, standing up together for social justice.
The man who is speaking is the member of the UAW.
When auto workers first organized our union, the NAACP stood with us. Cynical employers tried to use racial and ethnic divisions to prevent workers from joining together, but you stood up to speak truth to power. The truth that workers have a right to organize, that a labor union is a powerful weapon against prejudice and discrimination, is something we both understand. Since then, we have marched side by side to win strong civil rights laws, to end apartheid, to defend affirmative action. Today, the NAACP is standing once again with America's working families. Just a few weeks ago, the national president and CEO of the NAACP, Ben Jealous, spoke out to endorse the Employee Free Choice Act. This vital legislation will restore balance to America's workplaces, giving workers a chance to bargain for better wages and benefits. And we appreciate that tonight you honor the men and women of America's auto industry. While others have sought to tear us down, the NAACP has once again stood up to tell the real story about the importance of our industry, the value of our union, the fact that union manufacturing jobs are essential to build a middle class for all workers. We're working as hard as we can to find real solutions to the problems that face the U.S. auto industry. It's not easy, but any task is easier when you've got friends you can count on. Friends like the members of the NAACP. Thanks for all you do, and congratulations for bringing so many people together for tonight's event.
I want to acknowledge Mr. John T. Bozzella, Senior Vice President of the Chrysler Corporation, who is here tonight. Mr. Bozzella, glad to have you here. I'd like for Ms. Yvonne White, Michigan State Conference President, if she's here, if she would come to the podium. Please join me now in welcoming the International President of the United Auto Workers, Mr. Ron Gettelfinger.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Certainly, on behalf of the Executive Board and the men and the women of the UAW, we appreciate all your support. Standing together, we will be victorious. Solidarity, solidarity, solidarity forever.
Ron, we also want the workers to hold on, so we got some hands for you to keep holding on as well. Presents to Ron Gettelfinger and the United Auto Workers the Keep Holding On Award. Thank you very much for holding on. Thank you very much. We now are going to have our special honored guest to be presented, and I'm going to ask Ms. Marjorie Winters, who was the third vice president of the Detroit branch, to come and to make this first presentation. I did not mention, but I also want to acknowledge Brother Jamal Simmons, who was also with he's a consultant with CNN, but you know him from Detroit. Jamal Simmons, stand up, give him a hand. Our own Jamal Simmons, who's come back home to be with us. We appreciate you, Jamal. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Ms. Marjorie Winters will present to Reverend Al Sharpton this Freedom and Justice Award.
Thank you, Reverend Anthony, and good evening, freedom fighters.
Good evening.
As we commemorate 100 years of the most revered civil rights and social justice advocacy organization in the world, I am humbled by the opportunity to honor the legacy of one of the NAACP's co-founders and present an award in her honor, the Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Award. In September 1908, Ms. Ovington read an article by socialist William England Walling entitled "Race War in the North," which described a massive race riot directed at black residents in Springfield, Illinois, that led to 7 deaths and the massive destruction of homes and businesses. Walling ended the article by calling for a powerful body of citizens to come to the aid of blacks. Ovington responded to the article by writing Wallington and going to meet him at his home in New York City. Out of this meeting came a call for a national conference for the civic and political rights of African Americans. Many people responded to that call, and eventually led to the formation of the National Negro Committee, which later organized a permanent body we now know as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. While we have made much progress since 1909, the reality is that we still need those who will respond to that original call issued by William Walling. We still need people who will stand up for what is right, who will challenge the status quo, speak truth to power, and fight the fight regardless of who is or isn't fighting with them. Opinions of tonight's recipient of the Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Award vary widely. President Barack Obama calls him the voice of the voiceless and a champion for the downtrodden. His critics call him a racial arsonist. And everyday people, love him or hate him, agree that he is always there when an injustice occurs, and he is always fighting for the rights of the people. The book of Proverbs declares that the righteous are as bold as a lion. Bold is leading 1,200 demonstrators on a march through the streets of Howard Beach, New York, demanding justice after the assault of 3 African-American men by a mob of white men. Bold is demanding justice after Amadou Diallo, an unarmed immigrant, was shot to death by New York Police Department officers in 1999. Bold is running a noteworthy campaign for the presidency of the United States in 2004. Bold is consistently standing by the family and demanding justice for Sean Bell after he was shot and killed in a hail of 50 bullets at the hands of plainclothes detectives from the New York Police Department. Bold is defending the rights of the young men we have all come to know as the Gen of 6. Bold is confronting Don Imus about his disrespectful reference to the Rutgers women's basketball team. Bold is organizing protests and otherwise challenging the printing of a racist depiction of the president in a recent New York Post. Bold is declaring war on the inequalities in educational achievement and organizing a national rally to close the gap in education in Washington, D.C., coming up on May 16th. The Reverend Al Sharpton is truly as bold as a lion, and he has definitely dedicated his life to responding to the call issued in 1908. So on behalf of our president, Reverend Wendell Anthony, the executive committee, and the members of the Detroit branch NAACP, it is my distinct honor to present the 2009 Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Award to the esteemed Reverend Al Sharpton, Jr.
Thank you very much to my friend and brother, Reverend Anthony, and to all of the elected officials, to our fellow honorees, especially the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, and Reverend Jesse Jackson. First, let me thank the NAACP for this honor, and certainly I thank them for years of service. 100 years of freedom fighting should not be taken for granted. When the NAACP started, no one thought that we would be where we are today. But we ought not relax. We ought to start working for where we will be 100 years from now. And too often, we try and compete rather than cooperate. The fact of the matter is that our people, even with an African American in the White House, are still in trouble and still in need of freedom fighting. Tonight, we are still doubly unemployed. We are still behind in health care. We are still behind in education. We don't have the luxury of competing one group against the other. We all need to do our part to fight for freedom as the NAACP has done for the last 100 years. I'm reminded of a story of a young man who was drowning in the water, drowning in the depths of the sea. Someone came by from one group in the NAACP and threw down its rope, but its rope was a little too short for him to grab to pull out. Someone else came by from SCLC and threw down their rope. Their rope was a little too short for the young man to grab and pull out. Somebody came by from the Congressional Black Caucus. With all their strength, their rope was too short for that young man to pull out. Somebody came by from Rainbow Push. As long as they've been pulling out, their rope was too short to pull them out. Somebody came by from Nash Action Network. Our rope was too short to pull him out. And as the young man was about to go down for the last time, he yelled up, "Why don't y'all have enough sense to tie your ropes together and make a long rope and throw it down and pull me out?" It's time for us to tie our ropes together and pull our people out. If we tie our ropes together, we can save the auto workers. We can save our people in Detroit. We can save the schools. Tie our ropes together. We can pull our people out if we put our egos aside and stand up for freedom. Thank you and God bless you.
Amen. That's what you call sharp talk. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, and congratulations. We're pleased that you're here and for all that you continue to do for our community. Presenting the Ida B. Wells Freedom and Justice Award to our own Reverend Edwin Rowe, pastor of the Central United Methodist Church, Attorney John Johnson, First Vice President, Detroit Branch, NAACP.
Thank you, Reverend, and good evening to all of you. This award is named after a fearless anti-lynching crusader, women's rights advocate, journalist, and speaker. She stands as one of our nation's most uncompromising leaders and most ardent defenders of democracy. She was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1862 and died in Chicago, Illinois in 1931 at the age of 69. Ms. Ida B. Wells was a fighter for racial and gender justice. In 1906, she joined with W.E.B. Du Bois and others to further the Niagara movement, and she was one of 2 African-American women to sign the call to form the NAACP in 1909. Although Ida B. Wells was one of the founding members of the NAACP, she was also among the few black leaders to explicitly oppose Booker T. Washington and his strategies. As a result, she was viewed as one of the most radical of the so-called radicals who organized the NAACP. Our next honoree, the Reverend Edward A. Rowe, has appropriately been awarded the Detroit NAACP Ida B. Wells Freedom for Justice Award because he is, in fact, your radical's radical. Currently, the senior pastor at Central United Methodist Church, Reverend Rowe is an extraordinary person who passionately and continuously fights